According to the National Institutes of Mental Health, nearly 3 million Americans suffer from treatment-resistant depression, or TRD. Depression that, for the most part, cannot be alleviated by antidepressants or therapy alone. Ketamine, administered intravenously by a licensed professional, has helped some of these patients, but the treatment is time-consuming and can be costly since its use to treat depression is off-label and therefore not always covered by insurance. But early last year, the FDA expanded the approval of a nasal spray named Spravato. Its active ingredient, esketamine, is derived from molecules of ketamine, but it has its own unique chemical composition, and some doctors say it's been a game changer. Our Ike Ejiochi reports.
It feels like you're in the center of the universe, or the center of a rainforest, or the center of the ocean, or whatever it is that you're conjuring up, and it's just fantastic.
Daphne's outlook here is completely different from how she used to always feel.
Tired, achy, empty, sad, scared. It was all so much for me to absorb that I would just shut down.
A mood that Daphne says she couldn't shake for decades.
Oh my gosh, life was really terrible. It was. I never would hurt myself, but I just got to the place where I said, I just don't really want to wake up tomorrow.
Growing up, however, she was just a regular kid from a regular New Jersey town. It was in her early 20s, she says, she began to feel differently. And in her 40s, where she was diagnosed with depression and knew something had to be done.
It was the first time where I felt this is too sad and too empty of a life. Not being able to get off the couch, sending my son and husband at the time off to school and work, and going right back. This can't be what life is really about.
But Daphne says she would eventually find how challenging it is to manage her treatment-resistant depression.
I'd go on a medication, and then I'd start to feel better, and then I'd start to get depressed again. And then we'd raise the medication, and then that was the cycle.
I'm also going to have you fill out the patient update form.
Okay.
Just 2 years ago, Daphne's search for answers led her to doctors Haviva and Cheryl Malina,
I have to co-sign all the charts.
ER doctors and sisters-in-law who had been seeing an uptick in ER psychiatric cases, particularly during the pandemic.
Patients were coming to the emergency room and their symptoms, their depression, their anxiety, their PTSD was just really out of control.
Eventually, they ran into a very familiar drug, ketamine.
Ketamine was something we had worked with in the emergency room for many years, albeit in other contexts, but we were very intrigued by what it could do for people suffering with depression, anxiety, PTSD.
Ketamine was first introduced into clinical practice in the 1960s as an anesthetic. Over the past several decades, studies have demonstrated the clinical value of the drug to control pain and the off-label use for patients with treatment-resistant depression. In 2019, the FDA then approved Spravato, a nasal spray containing the active ingredient esketamine, a derivative of ketamine, originally meant to be taken in conjunction with an oral antidepressant. Early last year, it became the first and only FDA-approved standalone drug for TRD.
One of the largest studies, and also most recent, focuses on Spravato. After the first 4 weeks of treatment, 70% of the participants had a response to treatment, which means they had a 50% decrease in their symptoms.
The ER doctors now run several clinics administering Spravato. So what does a typical appointment look like when someone's about to be administered the esketamine?
They fill out a quick little form to let us know how they're doing. The nurse comes and does vital signs, makes sure that it's safe to administer the treatment that day.
What are they actually going through during that moment?
It's a sort of dissociation. So they feel a little detached from reality. Typically, it's a dreamlike, restful state.
I'll never forget the first time they gave me not a full dose, a starter dose to see how I'd react. So I took this stuff and I was like, Jesus Christ. I was like Alice in Wonderland. I woke up from it and I was like, this is very intense.
Dr. Jim Elwood, now in his 70s, says he's lived with depression since high school.
It really came to a head in college. I was ready to leave. And I went to the student counseling, telling them I wanted help finding like a job, something I could do if I left school. And right away they were like, no, we want you to talk to someone.
And did you try to talk to anybody at that time?
No, I was embarrassed about it. I didn't understand it, so I didn't want to talk about it. I was at the point like, what am I going to do? I don't know. I'm going to just have to learn to live with this. This is life. This is who you are. I didn't see a way out.
Dr. Elwood says there's a long history of mental illness in his family. He began taking medication for his depression at 30, but like Daphne and so many others, he says it never addressed the root of his issues.
We tried so many different things, and either I had side effects or they didn't work.
Okay, it's time for your second dose.
He knew about ketamine's medical use as an anesthesiologist, but never tried it. But when he was first given Spravato 40 years later, he says everything changed.
I was feeling like this is very different. I'm able to see myself in a different light. I mean, I had very negative self-image, and I was able to say, wait a minute, why am I being like that? Why am I seeing it that way?
The exact way Spravato works is unknown, but the doctors say esketamine and intravenous ketamine work differently than traditional oral medications.
It actually increases the amount of glutamate in the brain. And what that does is it promotes a process where more neural connections are being made. So people are able to find new pathways, reframing old ways of thinking. They're able to kind of get unstuck from ways that have troubled them or provided, mental health challenges.
A new lens on life.
Exactly.
Once they get their doses, the patients are monitored for 2 hours by the doctors to address any side effects.
Okay.
All right.
The most common being dissociation, high blood pressure, dizziness, and nausea. But waking up on this day, Daphne and Dr. Elwood describe seeing something completely different.
I see colors and I see patterns, and they're moving.
I see a lot of like geometric things, like beautiful geometric designs. I can't describe them. I also have this feeling of sinking, like a positive way, like letting go and floating.
And just breathe normally.
And while the doctors say they've seen positive effects, esketamine treatment only comes after thorough health screenings and isn't the same for everyone.
I ensure that there's no existing what we call medical contraindications or reasons the patient should not be getting this treatment from a medical standpoint, from a psychiatric standpoint. We take an individualized approach with every patient. It's not a magic bullet. I don't want to misrepresent that.
The doctors also focused on preventing the risk of abuse that's been seen with the mind-altering properties of traditional ketamine.
An autopsy revealing the 54-year-old Friends star Matthew Perry died of the acute effects of the drug ketamine after losing consciousness and likely slipping under the water in his hot tub.
Experts warn drugs like benzodiazepines, GHB, and ketamine, all tasteless, colorless, and odorless, can be dropped into drinks, leaving those who consume them disoriented.
According to the Drug Enforcement Administration, abusing ketamine can bring physical, psychological, and cognitive health risks, and possible overdose and death. How do you avoid that happening to patients here?
When it's medically supervised with physicians and nurses, with sort of a controlled dosing schedule, it has not been shown to be addictive.
What does the future of treatment look like?
I think it looks very bright because we see patients come and their lives are changed.
There's people walking around with smiles. You have no idea what's going on underneath. And I was one of those people. If you think that this treatment could help you, well then, by all means, explore. I can't imagine not having it available to me.
Some describe it as a wonder drug. Our thanks to Ike Ejiochi on that. And one final note, Spravato's manufacturer, Janssen Pharmaceuticals, runs a risk mitigation program and limits its distribution only to restricted channels. Spravato can only be given in a healthcare facility by a licensed professional with supervision